Judgment call. If you were not here last week, I'm gonna get you caught up like kind of speed round. What we talked about last week was really kind of focused on judging other people. And we said this, and this is kind of the premise of it. Like many of us were brought up to believe and to think that we weren't supposed to judge other people. And there's this sort of like passage that we walk through, and if you weren't here, I think I'd actually love for you to get caught up on it. If for nothing else, to read the passage that we talked about that says, judge not, because there's so much to it. And what we said to this was that when Jesus says that, Jesus isn't telling you to mind your own business, right? That's actually not at all what he's telling you in this passage or the people that he was teaching to. He told you to face yourself honestly so that you can actually help somebody else. And so he said the point of this passage around judge not and the planks and the speck and all that was that you could remove the thing in your eye so that then you could go help other people, right? And if you have a right view of yourself, it probably will feel like it's a plank in yours and a speck in theirs. And so he said, hey, when you do the work, when you lean into that, one of the best things that you can figure out how to do is to actually remove the part of you or remove the plank or deal with your own stuff so that you can be helpful to other people. But it has nothing to do with you minding your own business, has nothing to do with you being apathetic, and it certainly doesn't have anything to do with you being culturally afraid of whatever those things are. And we said this last week, we said facing yourself actually changes what you're capable of seeing, meaning this, that there are things about you that if you don't deal with them, it will shape your entire view of other people and the world, right? And I said it this way last week, I said this, that if you don't do that, you are to some degree incapable of seeing the things that you could help other people with, right? And if you don't do that well, you got to lean into that. And we said most of us sort of fall into one of three categories, and the vast majority of us fall into all three of them at different times and different seasons. But this is like the performer. This is the person who kind of keeps peace by performing well, pretending they have it all together. Jesus speaks specifically to that. We talked about that last week. There's the people that just sort of avoid the judge, conflict, all this sort of thing. And there's a version of this where you say, you know what? As long as it doesn't hurt me, or as long as it doesn't sort of misalign with my morality for how other people should act, then I'm just gonna avoid it. Like you do you, we've all heard that, or you do like whatever that is, and you just avoid the conflict conversation altogether. And then there's one, and this is sort of the one that I think a lot of us carry at some point. This is like the shield carrier. And we said this, it was like, hey, what you've done, and what I do a lot too, is I will work to sort of build a shield of my own goodness and morality so that I can hold that up, but at the same time, keep a lot of things behind that. And I protect myself so that when I actually lean into the judgment kind of stuff, I'm shielded, but I'm never vulnerable, right? And so if you're a person like me, right, who vulnerability doesn't come natural to you, right? Many of us are holding up a shield that we just don't let others in, and we go into these conversations, we might even go in aggressively, but we're doing it protected, which also makes us a lot less effective, right? And so we said this last week, and this is kind of the bottom line that we talked about, is love and loving people, right? It never writes people off. It doesn't write people off. Now that's not about boundaries. You just don't write people off. And then secondly, love also doesn't leave people stuck. And so if there's any part of the way that you engage people that causes you to write them off and be done, that's something that you've got to work on, right? It's not that you don't judge or you don't lean them in, but you got to work on that. The second part of this too is where you go, like, it doesn't leave people stuck. I am willing to have the harder conversation with people, and I'm willing to not just mind my own business, but to look at what's happening and step into that in a loving way. So we said all that last week, and so today I'll tell you what we're gonna do. If I can be like fully transparent with you, I had like, I worked on this about 6 months ago, and I had several variations of how I wanted to end it. You don't care about this, but this is kind of fun, at least for me to tell you. And so I had all of these sort of variations of the things that I wanted to talk about. And then there was one that bubbled up about 3 weeks ago, and I kind of laughed. I feel like this is a little bit of like a preacher thing, which is kind of funny. I picked the talk that we're gonna do today, and then after I did the last 2 weeks, everything that I'm about to talk about, I've had to struggle through the last 2 weeks, which is hilarious and also kind of sucks. And so for the last 2 weeks, everything we're about to talk about has been interesting. And it almost feels like to me, if I were listening to me knowing everything for the last 2 weeks, I'd go, well, you kind of wrote that about the last 2 weeks, but I actually wrote this several months ago. And I kind of laugh going, if you're any part of today, and I say this, and I'll tell you this, any part of today where I'm talking, you go, man, that just feels easy to say from the stage. I'd go, it is easier for me to say from the stage. And also, I'm dealing with it, right? I'm in the middle of it. And so today what we're going to do is this. We're going to talk about what happens specifically like when you're misjudged. And so here's like the question. What do you do when judgment like gets aimed at you, right? And this is always fascinating, right? We talk a lot about judging other people or not judging other people. But we don't always address, and I don't think pastors always address, what happens when the judgment like comes back towards you in a relationship or a series of circumstances or in something that happens in your life. What do you do next, right? What do you do when you're misjudged? What do you do when someone wrongs you? Why do you navigate these sorts of things? And a lot of times the easier answer that we give, and I believe in it, but it's a little bit incomplete. The easier answer we give is some version of forgiving the person and letting it go and moving on. And I believe that, and we've taught that, and we will teach that. And also, if you think of this as like a full, complete circle, that message gets you like 65% of the way there. And you and I also know that that's something that is true, and also there's something that's more. And so today is kind of fascinating in that I would say we've done the 65% quite a bit. Today we're going to do like the other 35%. And if you're wondering if I'm checking my math in my head, I absolutely am. And I'm right, which is great. So I was pretty proud of that. No, that's why I said it twice, so I could check it. Anyway, so as we look at that, the 35% is what we're going to talk about today. Now, I will say this, that when you find yourself in a position where you're wronged or you're misjudged or somebody brings that to you, right? There are more than 3 ways to respond, but there are 3 ways that are likely that you will respond. And many of us will go into weird versions of all 3, right? So here are the 3, right? The first one is to retaliate, right? And I'm gonna kind of ask you this. How many of you are like the retaliate people? Anybody like, come on, be honest about it. This is me. I'm immediately like, now it's not like anger. I'm not like slitting your tires or anything like that. Just me, apparently. That's great. All right, so retaliate, that's mine. So we'll just leave that for me. There's the other one where you just go silent. Can I say this? Like you just go silent about it. And this is what's always fascinating too. When you feel judged or you feel wronged or when those kinds of things happen, many people just do this. And I was actually brought up this way to go, I don't have to say anything. And to keep the peace, I just absorb the pain, right? Now, it's not that you're not gonna absorb the pain, but there's a version of this where you go, I can absorb it and I can be quiet and then we can move on. There's a version of the peacemaker, but ironically, this is always interesting. Even those of you who aren't naturally peacemakers, sometime absorb this and go silent to protect your own influence because you just don't wanna make anybody else angry, right? So it's actually kind of weird. This go silent thing, it makes its way into all different types of personalities depending on what your goal is. And then the other one is I'm gonna fix their perception. Now I struggled with this one too. When we were launching our church, we had an article done on us, and so there was a lot of stuff that went out to a lot of people that didn't know us. And I went into one of these like message board kind of things on the article, and it was just like just comment after comment. And so I'm laying in bed next to my wife and I'm in the middle of typing out a response because I'm smart and that's what you do. And so I'm writing this out. That was a joke. I'm writing this out and I just hear Emily going, huh? And I can feel her looking at the screen and she goes, oh, that's good. I was like, yeah, it is, right? Mm-hmm. I just keep going and I keep going. And my response was thorough. It was very clear, very direct. And then I finished and she goes, that felt good, didn't it? And I was like, yeah. She goes, don't you hit send. I was like, all right, that's great. That's fantastic. That's great. Yeah. So, and I just kind of laughed. And here's what it was. It wasn't even that I was just angry. And this is the assumption that I make sometimes, and I think many people make, is if they just knew more information, or if I could just tell you more about me or what happened or the circumstances, then your perception would change. And the problem about this, and you know this too, is it is very difficult, if not impossible, to change the perception of somebody who's already committed or doesn't care to know the truth, right? I know, this is 60% of online stuff, right? You know this. But that fix-it thing is real and true, where you go like, hey, I wanna fix the perception that they have of me, so I'm gonna lean in to that thing. All right, let's go to the next one real quick. So these are the 3 that we look at. Now, C.S. Lewis has this great quote. He's one of my favorite authors. And when he specifically talks about forgiveness, I love this quote because it kind of launches into the text in a second. But he says this. He says, everyone says forgiveness is a lovely idea until they have something to forgive. And I think this is very, very true, right? That you look at this and you go, everybody believes in forgiveness. Most people believe in like the freedom from the debt component of forgiveness. Like all of this is true. until you actually have to figure it out. And then what happens for many of us is when we have to figure it out, even though we believe in a version of forgiveness that often elevates us, we lean into the retaliation part, we lean into the going silent part, we leaning into the idea that I can fix the perception on my own and just lean into it, more information, more words, whatever that is. And sometimes it feels like those are only three real options. That if I was gonna figure out something else, those are three ways to do it. That I'm gonna get back at you and win, right? That I'm going to fix what you think about me, or I'm gonna absorb the pain and go silent because I don't wanna deal with whatever that thing is. And the problem with that is that's just not what the New Testament teaches around forgiveness. Now, again, 65% says you gotta release the debt, and you should. 65% of that conversation goes, I gotta figure out how to let it go, and you should for your own freedom. And also part of that conversation is that I don't have to forget what happened because you're wise and you're discerning, and it doesn't mean everybody gets the same access or friendship level, those kinds of things. But what I put in mind is, I said this, there's actually a fourth option to all of this. And the fourth option to all of this is not necessarily that it's so complex, it's just that it's so uncomfortable to do that most of us kind of lean into the original three that I talked about because it feels like the most comfortable way to do it. So today what we're gonna do, we're gonna look at two passages in particular, not a ton of verses, but a couple of passages where Jesus teaches on this. You've been around church for a while, you've probably seen these passages, you've probably been around it, you've probably heard it, but in the middle of this teaching, I'll say as well, for people that are followers of Jesus, it's wildly uncomfortable, it's incredibly true, and when you actually apply it fully, it really does have the power to change your life, right? So we're gonna be in Luke chapter 22. That's where we're gonna pick up, and then here's what's going on. So this is, I guess should give you context. This is actually the scene of the crucifixion, right? Which is not typically what you hear on a forgiveness passage. And there's this one line in this passage that I think is a game changer for what we're talking about. And so the story around this, without getting too graphic, is that obviously, Jesus went through his life. He ends up being arrested. He's arrested for something that he didn't do. He's arrested for, very unjustly, goes through this. He's silent through the process. Eventually ends up on the crucifixion sort of thing. I describe this every Easter, but he's likely crucified around eye level. There's a bunch of people around that are happening. But the part of this that sort of gets left out, or at least doesn't talk about enough, is there's two other people on either side of Jesus as he's being killed, right? And what we find in the text, and this is what we'll look at in a second, there's one person who sort of leans into what Jesus is and who he is on the cross, and the other one is very against it, right? But out of the three, Jesus is the only innocent one, right? And so Jesus is on the cross. Again, without getting too graphic, he's suffocating for several hours. You see these like brief moments of the conversation and all these people around and all the people who are part of it, and also a small group of people who are friends and family of him and likely the other people, right? And so there are people watching this, Jesus at eye level, suffocating on the cross, and this is what it says. It says, when they came to the place called the Skull, they crucified him, along with the other criminals. And the one on his right, the other on his left. And then Jesus says this, and this is the part that's so fascinating to me. He says, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. And for years, I would read this, and you hear it, you teach it, all this kind of stuff, and it's a really powerful statement. And part of the powerful statement is you find Jesus like praying for these people that were involved in this, praying for all of the people that were around, praying for the people that had very much tortured him. All of this in this place. Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. But the part of this that was so fascinating, and again, I think this is interesting. Mark chapter 2, I won't read all of this. Mark chapter 2 lays out this clear theology that Jesus has both all of the divine power and he's also human. So he's God and human in the flesh, meaning that he has the power, I very much believe, to do just about anything he wants in this moment, right? But what he prays is fascinating. If I hold all the power in this moment, and again, hear me on this, I don't pray, Father, forgive them. I just say, I forgive you. And this is a weird moment in the text. Because what Jesus does is he actually brings all of this back to the Father. He brings all this back to the Father, and then essentially he intercedes or prays specifically on their behalf to God. And this is a weird thing, because when you look at this, you go like, I was always taught to just forgive, and there's like a my strength, my component to this, which again, there certainly is, and all of those things are true. But also, is it true that there are circumstances, it's not even that we don't have the capacity or capability to forgive on our own, but there are moments where we actually bring it to God almost first and go, actually, this is yours. Like, Father, forgive them in this moment. Right? Jesus intercedes for those hurting him. And this is the part that's, again, fascinating. In this moment, Jesus entrusts justice to God. And this is a weird moment, again, when you look at the text and you go, I know I'm not Jesus. I think that's very clear. And also, if I'm on the cross and I want to exude strength and might, I could just get off the cross. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, or I could at least like send lightning down so that everybody knows. Do you know what I mean? I don't know. There's a lot of things I could probably come up with to do in that moment to flex power. He intercedes for them, but on the flip side of it, this is what's interesting. He doesn't enact his own justice in this moment on the people who caused him pain. He entrusts justice to God in this moment. And what's unsettling and unnerving about this is simultaneously he's taking the brunt of that on the cross for all of us, but also for the people that are doing it. And that's uncomfortable. Like, that doesn't feel great because I like justice. I told you last week, like, let's go. Like, there's a part of me that goes, I want to be the one. You know what I mean? Like, every once in a while, like a movie will pop up on like a TikTok feed. Anybody ever seen this where you're like flipping through and it's like a whole movie summary? Have you ever seen this? And like one came up recently and they're like a couple of minutes long, but it's like all the important scenes. And it's not like Taken, but it's something like that. Do you know what I'm talking about? And the whole time I'm just sitting there like, I mean, I feel like I could do that fighting move. You know what I mean? Like, I'm pretty confident in that, you know? And I'm looking at this and every part of this, now this is what's tough, feels good to me. That I or a person could enact their own version of what the justice is because it should be dealt and it should be given and I'm right. And then arguably one of the most important moments in history, what Jesus does is he recognizes and limits their blindness to what is happening. Their blindness to what is happening. He doesn't minimize the evil of it, but he recognizes the blindness. And then he brings it to the Father, and he intercedes on their behalf. You go to the next slide, Kim. So many of the people who have wounded you were not trying to destroy you, even though it feels like that in the moment. Many of them were trying to survive themselves, and they used you to do it. And that's unsettling. And the reason that it's unsettling is this. I think there are people who do really, really evil things. So like, let me also say there are categories to what we're talking about, and this does not apply to every category. But like, by and large, people who have hurt you, like the vast majority of these people, they probably even meant to. But also there's probably more to the story, and you know this. Because you hear human stories about people sometimes who do things that have even hurt you or made you angry. And you go, it's not that it minimizes the evil that was done, but what it actually does though is it humanizes the person who did it. And it's not that you don't want justice anymore, but there's also a part of you that goes, okay. And what's hard is when that happens mid-swing. Do you know what I mean? No, I'm just kidding. You know, there's a little bit of that. Like, you feel that. You know, you feel this sort of thing where you feel the weight of the person in front of me, and then you become aware of your own moments and tendencies and sin and pain that you've caused. Sometimes intentionally and sometimes unintentionally, but also intentionally, you know? It humanizes the person that's in front of you. You go to the next one. This is Luke chapter 23, verse 34. It goes on. And again, the language that Luke gives, again, Luke was a physician, so his language and his clarity about the details are fascinating. But it says they divided up his clothes by casting lots, which is a fascinating detail. I won't go into like how casting lots is, but it's like if you laid out someone's clothes as they were suffocating on a cross, and you're trying to figure out what we're going to do with it, you like pass it along, and you might have won the Jordans. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like, somebody got what he was wearing. You know what I mean? Which, again, I think the reason he includes it is to make the stark contrast to what feels evil and what feels pure at the same time. The people who would have read this early on, and even us now, because of the clarity that we have, would have known that Jesus' mother is there. So you're crucifying someone in front of his mother and divvying up his clothes amongst the people, right? And then he goes on. It says, the people stood watching, and the rulers even sneered at him, which again, original language here isn't like a ha-ha-ha. Like there's a deep-rooted joy that these people are getting in the moment. And they said, he saved others, let him save himself if he is God's Messiah, the chosen one. Now, I think this is when I would have lost it. This is when the lightning comes down and I start Jackie chanting all of these people. Like, this is where, like, I'm good until you're sarcastic or condescending, and then I'm just like, like whatever it is. Like, I don't do it. And I look at this and I go, again, Jesus on the cross, interceding for the people who are enacting evil upon him. And he brings it to the Father. Then it goes on. He gives us more clarity. The soldiers also came up and mocked him. They offered him wine vinegar as he is very dehydrated, bleeding profusely. Wine vinegar, if you were the king of the Jews, save yourself. The wine vinegar would have made him more thirsty, right? And there was a written notice above him which read, this is the king of the Jews. Again, as condescending as you could possibly. So in every possible way, they are exacting this torture on him. And in the midst of all of this, one of the criminals responds to him and then hurls insults at him. Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us. Which again, this is the part of the story that I think is almost more fascinating. Like, we get it with all of them, but dude, you actually did it. You know what I mean? Like, you're actually guilty. And start hurling insults at him. And then it goes on in verse 40, it says this. It says, but the other criminal rebuked him, which again, you have this like beautiful picture in the story of somebody who seems to get it. Don't you fear God? Since you are under the same sentence, we are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve, but this man has done nothing wrong. And this is a famous part of the passage that most people have looked at, and it gets taught a lot. It goes on and it says this. Next verse, then he says, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus responds to him, truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. Today you will be with me. So you have one insulting him. You have the other one going, hey, like, wherever you're going, take me. You have all of these other people sneering at him, and then you have the brokenhearted people that are also in the midst of all of this as well. And I put in my notes to say this way. In the midst of being misjudged, Jesus turns towards a person who sees him clearly, and Jesus brings him home. I'm sorry. And this is the part that, like, for years I'd read through this, and there's so many things to get about it. But what Jesus doesn't just teach, what Jesus models, is that when all of this is brought to him, what he does is he knows his mission, he knows what he's there for, he intercedes on the behalf of the people that are causing the pain, and then he brings this person home. And I'll tell you, like, that's the 35% he almost wish isn't in the text. Because when it's you, or when it's someone that you care about, or somebody that you love, I don't want to do any of those things. None of that comes naturally. All of that feels like resistance. And all of that is in part what makes Christianity so irresistible. And people who are empowered by the Spirit change the world. That you are capable of more than you ever imagined that you could be. Not because of you, but because Jesus actually changes your heart. Forgiveness doesn't pretend that the wound, right, doesn't matter. It's deciding that God is a better judge than you, and you decide to follow him. And that never feels good. Never does. Never does. Now, I'm going to rewind the passage a little bit. And I love the way that Luke talks about this, because we get the picture of this with the crucifixion, but then we get what Jesus had taught quite a bit earlier in the midst of all of it. In Luke chapter 6, Jesus teaching to a large group of people. And here's what he says. He says, but love your enemies. And that's great. Truthfully, I can love them without doing anything for them. And he goes, yeah, but I'm talking to you, Patrick. Here's the other part. Also do good to them and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. And then your reward will be great. And this is the part that, again, gets brushed over quickly. And then you will be children of the Most High, because he is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. And I know I'm reading into this part of it, but I go, oh man, really? Like, are we sure? Do we have to be? You know what I mean? He's kind to the ungrateful and wicked, and it's almost as if Jesus is showing this. So don't miss this. And you know who that is? That's you. Because I'm always like, but him, right? You know what I mean? And you got a name or a list of names. Sometimes my list of names is like this. You ever done this before? You know what I mean? Like I don't know. But no, he is kind and ungrateful. And he loves them too. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Luke 23 is the picture that we get of Jesus actually living this out, right? Luke 6 is the practice of it. This is what it means. Well, how do I love my enemy? Well, you do good to them. And you lend to them. You take something that you earned, that is yours, and you also go, and you too. That God actually loves them too. And the picture of Luke 23 that is so unsettling that, after probably around 20 to 25 years of reading these texts and trying to study them, I still don't have a great, it doesn't feel great. And also Jesus is on the cross for the person who stabs him in the side just as much as he is for his mother that's in front of him crying. And that is a lifetime to understand. That both of them, on either side, either one of them, you look at both and you go, he's for him, but also for him. And he wants them to turn their hearts to them. So here's what I'm going to say. And I want to say this as clearly as I can, because some of you hear this and you're a little bit angry, and you're a little bit angry because of what was done to you as a category that you don't even know how to fully do this with. And I've talked about this before, and I'll say this whenever we talk about forgiveness or these sorts of pieces. I mean this very, very deeply. I would say this. There are categories where I think boundaries are so important and that you should set. And absolutely, we've talked about things like sexual abuse. We've talked about really any kind of abuse, talked about marital abuse. There's a lot of categories that you go this is not someone you bring back into the picture. That is not what I'm talking about. That's not what I'm about to talk about. But there are a lot of categories that I am talking about. And the ones that I am, I would say, again, that 35% that's last, what I'm about to show you and teach you on this is, again, I love that I was forced to be almost tested in these last few weeks. And to be really blunt with you, there are moments that I was I'm doing pretty good. And then the other 97% of it, I was not, right? And I was a little bit angry that I wrote this because I had it in my notes. And for the first 2 days of what I was looking at, I didn't even want to look at my notes because I didn't want to reread it. And then I applied it. And I don't know how to explain this. And this is one of those beyond natural things that we talk about, Sabbath and tithing and all these kinds of things. I go there is a component where it's an invitation for God to get more involved than it seems like he sometimes is. And when you do those things, it's almost like he shows up in miraculous ways. And I would say when I applied what I'm about to tell you, there was a lift to all of it that is almost unexplainable until you do the discipline and the work of just being obedient to what he's called us to do. So here's the 4. For those people, I think you actually pray for them. Now, you can choose the David kinds of prayers, rain down fire on their heart. Those are those kinds of prayers. That's not what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Now, you can pray for their kid to strike out. That's totally fine. But outside of that, you know what I mean? Other than that, not so much. But I'd say, but pray for them. And here's what I mean by that. You ready? And here's how you know. And I try not to get emotional about this, but this is emotional for me. When you pray for them, and it actually hurts, and it is painful for you to pray for the person that you're praying for because you feel like you're being taken advantage of. In a culture that says, nope, it's all about you, there is a death to you that comes and a freedom to you that comes when you go, even now, I will pray for you. You bless them. This is the part that I'm very good at skipping. A leader one time told me, and he was absolutely right, He says, insofar as you can go for the betterment of other people, whoever they are, you do that thing because it does something to your heart. Now, obviously, I work out a lot. I think that's very clear. Looking at you guys. But I would say this. Let me say this. It is a muscle. And I don't think that it's that it gets easier. Actually, I played sports in college. We had to go to like the weight room every day. And I always kind of laughed because a lot of people love that. But what they actually love is the pain of getting better. And also it's still painful, right? I don't think this goes away. It's like you're working out and it's still painful. And you begin to embrace that pain, right? So I think that's part of it, right? So you bless them, right? Then you release them. And this is the part that, again, we talk about a lot in forgiveness. But I'd say like you release them of the debt that they owe you. And the hard part is you cannot release future debts. I don't know how you do that. Which means sometimes, somebody actually emailed me this. I thought it was such an insightful question. Sometimes you're forgiving consistently for the future pain that they're going to cause as they do it. Right? Some of you know that I grew up in a home where it was just me and my mom. And the pain with my dad often would come up consistently and in new ways. Right? And so you still have to apply that to these things. Right? So you release them of those debts, future debts. The last one is this. That's the entrusting judgment to God. I think I know I've said it. I'm like an Enneagram 8. So justice is pretty high for me. I like things to be right in the world. Like all those things are true of me, right? So this one's tough. And often it's tough because I'm pretty confident that sometimes I could do it better than he could. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like there's a little bit of that. Like I feel like I could help with that. If whenever you need me, I'm here. And he's never asked for that. And but I would say this. This isn't every situation. Again, this doesn't mean that you don't hold the boundaries or you don't hold the laws or you don't it's nothing like that. But I think you know what I mean. I think you know what I mean when you talk about that person in a way that's not overtly gossip, but at the same time, it's a little bit, I think you know what I mean, like when you fantasize when you're driving about how your conversation could and should have gone, and you win every one of those. I am a Jedi freaking master, alone in my car 4 hours later. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know what I'm talking about when someone does you wrong in business, and you know what you could do, and you enact restraint that they don't deserve, but you trust God with that part. Or when somebody hurts your kid, now, depending on how they hurt your kid, but like they said that thing, and you know why they said that thing, and you know that you've got to hold that thing, and you're like, how do I do that? And you go, I can enact justice. I can figure out a savvy way to get my way, and also, it's not mine. And I think over the years, what I've come to see, I don't know how to say this well, so if I don't, please forgive me, and I'm sure I'll mature along the way to figure out a better way to say it. It was along my life, as those things have popped up, I have actually seen God do things. And I looked at it, and here's what's tough, is that I think you are applying this well when your initial response to someone else, sometimes experiencing God's judgment, I miss this, is a broken heart rather than a joyful spirit. And it almost causes you to come back and pray for them again. And that's like the last boss of the Mario video game. Do you know what I mean? Like that's kind of the one where you go, oh, like my heart isn't just good, it's becoming pure and new. And when you do it, it's painful. And when you do these things, it's also freeing. And I don't know how to fully describe that. And it's absolutely true. That when you do those things, there's a freedom that comes from it. And when you do those things, God does his thing, and it's always a little unexplainable, always a little bit weird. And also, he sees you. And he always will. And also, the person that you feel like should get whatever that thing is also his too. And that is unsettling and painful. And he died on the cross for them. So I want to give you like 4, 5, 7 steps to apply all of this stuff. That's the closest I got. Those 4 things. And in the moments when you go, I'm trying to figure out the forgiveness, and there's that last part, that it's a little bit more complex than just the releasing the debt. That it's actually something that's deeply painful and hurtful for me. I don't know what to do with it. And especially on the times when you're right. That you go, God, this is actually yours. I will choose to do what you said. Bless them, the do good part. I'll choose to allow you to do what you think is best for them and the world. That's not mine to hold. And I'll release the thing as many times as the thing comes up. And when you do, I don't miss this, I don't know how to say it well, it actually changes your life. So, with that, let me pray for us. And then I got a couple of announcements for you, and then we'll wrap up. Let me pray. Father, we thank you so much that I nestled in one of the most important stories of all time, most biggest moments of history. God, you allow us to see not just what you taught, but how you lived in that moment. And there's a part of this for many of us, including me, where I would love to follow you in the places that always make sense and always follow you in the places where it feels easy, follow you in the places where I agree with everything, but this is kind of one of those sort of areas that you invite us into a level of obedience that doesn't always make sense, but it is always freeing. And it is what's best for us. And so I just pray that you would help us to trust you with it. The person in the room who's carrying like a sort of a categorical thing that is outside of the realms that we're talking about and like trying to process those things, I pray that you give them clarity around it. Some of these things certainly apply to this, but some of them don't. And this doesn't mean that people would need to have access again or it's not that. But I just ask that you would help them to find healing and trusting you with whatever it is that you're going to do in those circumstances. That you remind them that you see them. And all throughout Scripture, from the very beginning. God, people who hold pain that's often unseen by many of us. God, you just show up and you see them and you're present. And I just pray that today for those people would be an invitation for you to come close. And for all the other categories that kind of fall into what we're talking about today specifically, help us just to be like you. Help us to actually be like you. Give us the maturity, for many of us, far beyond our years. Help us be known for doing good, blessing others. And help us to not just carry the pain or absorb it, but to actually pass it to you and trust you with it. Because if you are who the writers of the New Testament say that you are, who Jesus points to in these moments, you are actually a good Father who both sees us and sees the world, and you do heal. It's in Jesus' name we pray.